Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Collegiate Hearthstone Championship. Once again, I'm TJ. This is That's Admirable. We are moments away from jumping into that first matchup between UT Austin and UNC Chapel Hill. We saw the deck list briefly on the screen there, so we get to see a little bit of what these guys have in store for us moving forward in this first match.
Yeah, the big talk, again, I think it happened from North America qualifying tournament, was that you were kind of on one side of the fence or the other. It's like, were you playing a warrior deck, or were you the guy trying to beat the warrior deck? Mm-hmm. And we kind of saw players really take different approaches to that, where they wanted to be the ones beating it, and they wanted to be the ones not being targeted by the other ones as well. Nias and Trump actually both made it through the top 8 playing not warrior in their lineup, which is a pretty big deal. And that's the same thing we're seeing right here, right off the bat. I mean, there's not a warrior in one lineup, there is a warrior in the other. And with Grim Patron being as powerful as it is, I'm still always a little bit surprised when I see a lineup without a warrior in it. But with Warlock, Druid, and Mage, Tempo Mage very much targeted at beating, I would say, warrior. A lot of the Warlock builds are going to do the same thing. Druid is just such a powerful deck. I think it can beat most of the other non-warrior decks that are out there.
Yep.
I actually am really liking these lineups specifically for tournament play.
Yeah, the Hearth Hills, or the players from UNC Chapel Hill, have pretty much that lineup that we've seen in competitive play for at least since TGT, a little bit after TGT was released, the Warlock, Warrior, and Druid. I mean, you could substitute a Hunter in there somewhere, but Demon Handlock, Midrange Druid, Patron Warrior. Now, we don't know too much about what these players like to do, so they could throw in maybe a Control Warrior, maybe a Zoo Warlock or a Demon Zoo Warlock. Druid, not really too much flexibility with that other than some tech cards here and there, but it could be interesting. And the Mage was sort of that wild card. Tempo Mage has a pretty decent matchup against a lot of those, that big three, the Warlock, Warrior, Druid matchup. So it's pretty cool to see that class being brought in.
Yeah, something else that really is going to strike me as interesting is, given that these guys are not full-time players, how much of their specialty is really coming into play with that, with their card choices. I think it actually is going to be a pretty big factor here. And something else to talk about, too, is the Mage builds. We mentioned that a lot of these decks don't really have too much dimension to them. A lot of the best lists are pretty cut and dry for the moment. But Mage is wide open. We saw so many different Tempo Mage decks in North American Qualifier. There's no telling really what the best build that is yet. Firebat was running Water Elementals and Piloted Shredders. He was running Azure Drake as well, along with Effigy. We saw players not running Effigy at all in some of their builds, really focusing on the Flamewaker builds. I can't wait to see how this deck is built, because I think that's going to be the driving force in this matchup. All
right, well, looks like we are jumping in to game number 1 of this best of 5. On the top side, Triple AKGF, who's going to be the representative from University of Texas Austin. And then, of course, Paradox is going to be the representative for UNC Chapel Hill. And you can see all the players there together. And, of course, we mentioned earlier, they are allowed to collaborate. They are encouraged to collaborate on every single deck, every single turn.
Yeah, and this is something, again, that we have not seen in such a long time in competitive play. And I'm curious exactly how they're going to end up holding up. I mean, this is a point where a lot of times when players are playing by themselves, you see a lot of the emotion reserved because they're so focused on this one. But I think in a situation like this, where all of the words are kind of coming out and everyone's sharing their thought on the matter, you're likely to see some emotions really open up from these guys, especially with so much on the line.
Yeah, it's cool to see that the guys from UTA looks to be in like some dorm room, and then the guys from UNC, I believe, look to be just like in a classroom, playing Hearthstone in a classroom there. Pretty interesting.
First matchup for the South region, and a good opening hand for Druid. You got Wild Growth and the Pilot Shredder. Pretty tough to ever really look down on that, but not a bad hand on the Warrior side of things either. Armorsmith, Acolyte of Pain, Deathspite, and an Inner Rage. Not really too much more you're going to be wanting in this hand. And I was just about to mention it. With that Inner Rage, one of the biggest deals that you can have against Druid with his Warrior deck is to have a Deathspite set on the board, and then go Grim Patron, Inner Rage, and then activate that Deathspite. That gives you 14 power on the board, and then off into the swing. And for Druid, that's something they don't want to have to be handling.
Yeah, the only thing here is that since UTA was on the Wild Growth, the Powder Shredder comes out a turn sooner than you're expecting. So he's going to be probably thinking about coining out the Deathspite here in order to deal with the Powder Shredder, or at least the first iteration of it. In which case, he's delaying that big Grim Patron, Inner Rage, Deathspite, Whirlwind Effect, swing turn until one more turn. He might be thinking about maybe swinging the next turn as well to get a draw out of the Acolyte of Pain. There's a little bit more that goes into it now that he has to get the Deathspite out a turn earlier.
And that's exactly where I wanted to kind of take that too, is because now we're in a situation where normally I think the Druid not very favored in a situation like this, but because he's got that slight lead on the board, maybe that's something they can actually convert into staying ahead on this board and maybe finishing this game before Grim Patrons get out of control.
Yeah, the delaying the Grim Patron turns, or even you want to go forward to it, the Warsong Commander Grim Patron or the Warsong Commander Frothy Berserker turns, delaying it by 1 turn might be all you need to put that little bit of extra damage, to put the Grim Patron Warrior closer into combo range, or allows you to get 1 more creature out onto the board to defend against that type of thing. Could be a big deal in the long run.
Yeah, and that's kind of Hearthstone in a nutshell, you know, making the most out of the situation you get yourself into. And you hit the nail right on the head. That 1 extra turn can make a world of difference. I mean, look at Wild Growth, for instance. Wild Growth, the entire card is dedicated to getting you 1 step ahead of your opponent, and that's often enough to snowball the game out of control. So to see this Emperor Thorson coming down right now and have this Shade on the board, there is some potential for the Druid to actually run away with this game.
Yeah, that's very true. If you're UNC, though, I mean, you have to be a little bit happy about not seeing a big threat come down on turn 4. He had 5 mana available. You could have seen something like a Druid of the Claw, but instead he just saw a Shade of Naxxramas plus a Hero Power. So it allowed him to just play the Acolyte of Pain without having to swing for the Despite with the Despite and save it for this turn, or for the next turn, where he will be able to do those things and not have as much pressure on the board.
Yeah, I think you would have been likely to see that Despite save just because of the way that the Grim Patron interaction works. It's pretty much too strong to pass up at this point. But I think something they're not going to be happy to see is this Emperor Thorson. Now, that being the case, is UTA thinking about that right now? Are they wanting to hang on to this Emperor Thorson maybe? You know, because denying the draws, getting a couple extra minions out, maybe you can get some use out of this Darnassus Aspirant. You know, all of these little tiny things matter right now. Because say they use the Despite this turn, then it looks like the Emperor Thorson might stick to the table.
Yeah, also, and this turn he's denying the draw, as well as putting out multiple threats, you said. If Emperor Thorson's played, it just gets killed by the Despite. The second swing of the Despite just kills it outright. This way, he has to make the decision. Do I throw the Despite into the Keeper of the Grove, leaving the Aspirant up? Or do I throw it in the Aspirant and leave the Keeper of the Grove up? Either way, the guys from UTA are going to be able to contest at least 1 patron if that's the play that they think that UNC is going to go for.
Yeah, and that's a big point too, is the fact that since they have multiple small threats out, now suddenly you're looking at a spot where they can contest the Grim Patrons. Druid usually in this spot does not have a lot of good answers to this, but suddenly it's looking like this storm may be able to be weathered.
Yeah, especially having that shade on the board. Now, it's kind of a bummer to have to use so many resources in order to take this stuff out, because he used a Grim Patron in a Rage and half of a Despite in order to make a huge board like this, where you look at triple AKGF and the other guys from UTA, they're going to have to use throw their Shade in, throw their Keeper in, maybe also play another Keeper or even the Force of Nature. It's kind of rough, and even then, it doesn't look like they're still going to be able to deal with the whole board super efficiently.
Yeah, this is really a big turn for UTA. They're going to have to make a decision right now. Do they think they can fight the resource battle, or are they going to have to kind of really put all their eggs in one basket and really go for this Force Nature Savage Roar? You know, that decision oftentimes, even though it's not coming up until turn 9, they have to figure out how to set up that turn right now, 2 turns ahead of time. And there's multiple cards to be drawn. There's still 4 cards in UNC's hand. This is a very difficult spot for them.
Yeah, and the dynamic of Patron Warrior could be a little bit interesting when you're playing in a team environment like this. You got to tell your buddy, whoever's controlling the mouse, to go. If you're getting to a turn where animations are going to be a key factor in how it's going to play out, I'd like to see if that's going to play into effect later on as this match goes on.
Yeah, so they're going to play it slow here. The silence definitely helps keep these Grim Patrons under control. You know, for now, everything's looking pretty good. You know, it's really going to rely on what UNC's hand is right here. Now, the big blessing here is that they have that Battle Rage, which is going to help them refuel, but they also have drawn 2 Warsong Commanders, and that's a card that in multiples doesn't provide you any benefit. You want the first one, the second one is never something you want to see, but you got to have 2 copies because you want to draw that first one.
Yeah.
So what these cards are from Battle Rage makes a big deal here, but the fact that they're getting 3 cards for 2 mana, this attrition war might have just been turned on its head.
Exactly, and you can tell that triple AKGF and Druid UTA guys are running out of cards. Just combo plus Emperor Thorson in hand is great if you look like you're about to close your opponent out of the game, but Paradox and UNC are sitting at a pretty comfortable 27 health. Yeah. So that's not really going to be an option, and you can tell 4 cards drawn that turn, 3 with the Battle Rage, and then 1 from the Gnomish Inventor on top of the...
Hello!
Well, Dr. Boom helps.
Yeah, we were just hitting on this point, and I was going to say this Emperor Thorson is going to tell UNC that UTA is really out of gas at this point. I mean, a turn 8 Emperor Thorson hero power, not the strongest turn in the world. but suddenly they're reloading with Dr. Boom. So, I mean, UNC once again is going to have their work cut out for them. They happen to have Execute, but again, not a ton behind this. They have a minion advantage, but, just a couple of different card draws here. UTA can still run away with this. Like say UNC ends up picking up a Fire War Axe, maybe they pick up 1 or 2 more utility cards, and UTA draws Ancient Allure. Suddenly you're looking at this game right back to where it was a couple of turns ago.
Yeah, and if you're the Druid player against Patron and you see something like an Inner Rage that has to be used to proc and execute, then you're starting to get to that point where you can start counting the amount of damage that the Patron Warrior can do, because you're starting to see those combo pieces come into play, and you know that those aren't going to be used to kill you later on in the game.
Yeah, I actually really like this play from UTA here as well. Instead of playing the Dr. Boom, they're going to test the waters with this Emperor Thorson. And remember what I just said, how that Emperor Thorson would tell UNC that their hand might be a little bit weak. They might still read it this way. So if an Execute ends up getting used on this Emperor Thorson, suddenly the Dr. Boom might go uncontested. And since they're running so low on cards, this is really the one kind of play they can make to get back into it. So I love that they've done it this way. Very smart play.
Yeah, and we'll have to see how UNC is going to react to it. Will they use the Execute? They do have the means to kill it without having to use an Execute if they feel like that's going to be a precious resource that they need to hold on to. Like he could throw the Gnomish Inventor in and then maybe Inner Rage it, but Execute is going to be used, and that does pave the way for the Dr. Boom.
Yeah, and I actually, there's 2 different ways they had to do this. Number 1 would have been to use one of these Warsong Commanders and couple that with the Armorsmith and the Gnomish Inventor. So the question here really was, are those 2 small bodies worth as much as that Execute is right now? And then the other thing that's happening is once you have that Warsong Commander on the board, that puts a lot of pressure on the Druid to either answer that card or, be very scared of what can follow up afterwards. And since they had 2 of them, one of these might have been expendable. So that's a very interesting turn to look at. If you're looking to maybe study some of these Grim Patron turns and take a look at the small differences, that turn is really the best one to look at.
Yeah. And now we got to look at sort of the mental game here. If you're Paradox and UNC, you have to think, well, man, he just reduced 3 cards with Emperor Thorsan, and 2 of them are going to sit in the left side of his hand for a long time.
Yeah.
Which pieces of the combo are those?
Someone on that team is definitely in charge, I think, of tracking where these cards have been sitting in the hand and making sure that they can discern as much of this as possible. But again, having them just use that Execute, this looks like it's wide open for the Dr. Boom. Of course, UTA, they don't know that Warsong Commander and Grim Patron are sitting in the other hand, but I don't think they have an option. Frankly, TJ, I think they got to go for this right now.
Yeah, at some point, it's the same as when you're trying to play around combo. At some point, you just have to say, you know what, I can't jump through hoops to do it anymore. I don't have the resources to hold back. I just sort of have to throw up my hand, hope he doesn't have the cards that he needs to counter this nearly perfectly. But, I mean, it looks like Paradox and UNC do, because having that Inner Rage as well, propagate a lot of patrons, reduce the chance that something like a Warsong Commander gets picked off by a Boombot is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, you just hit the nail right on the head once again. This game, you're going to have to take a risk at some point, and those risks a lot of times can be calculated, but sometimes you got to hope for the best. And this was one of those situations for UTA. They just did not have the resources, I think, to fight one of these long games. They had to hope for the best, and sometimes when you hope for the best, the worst happens.
Exactly. And a little bit unfortunate there, but that's probably one of the best targets that you could hit. Of course, you want it to hit the one of the new patrons for like 1 or 2 to spawn another one, propagate more, but I say that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
They clear the board and they put on damage. What more could you ask for?
I would say the situation's looking pretty darn good for UNC. UTA picks up Azure Drake. I mean, so maybe there's a swipe hidden on top of the stack, but outside of that, they are working on slim pickings for their cards. That Force Nature Savage War, it's taking up half of the life right now.
Yeah.
Usually want to be taking up the last half rather than the first.
Yeah, it's great to have it reduced, but it's not going to work out for him in this case. By the time he goes for, gets the Azure Drake out and tries to draw into more threats or even like double combo, he's still even if he draws the second Savage Roar, the Force of Nature double Savage Roar is still only 22 damage. We say only 22 damage, but that's not enough to kill Paradox and UNC just yet. So
yeah, this is about swipe or bust right here.
Yep.
Pilot Shredder, I mean, they're not totally out of it yet. They still have 17 life. So, we can see UNC's hand. They actually don't have the damage to end it quite this turn just yet. But this is the spot where UTA, you can tell how desperate they feel with this Force Nature play. They feel like they've got to get something done. The Warsong Commander's too threatening, and this is kind of exactly what I was alluding to earlier. The first one, they're happy to get rid of it and make some use out of it. Now they find themselves in a situation where the second one, though, it becomes precious.
Yeah, the thing here, though, is Paradox and UNC don't really have any ways to sort of activate all of these cards that are in their hand. They don't have any whirlwind effects to make these Frothing Berserkers do more damage or to draw cards with Battle Rage. They just have pieces, and there's not really too many ways to draw either. With a 4-tech creature on board, you can get 1 out of the Acolyte of Pain. You can't really damage any of your creatures either. It's a little bit awkward.
Yeah, something that I'm taking a look at here with this hand is just the way it's been. Well, I mean, maybe that could change a few things here or there. They're going to go ahead and go for the big Frothing Berserker this turn. You know, taking a quick glance at this, we're looking at 6 points of damage, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 points of damage. Not quite there this turn, but they're getting some major swings in the board position, and I think that's probably the more important thing, because again, every single time U2 uses a card like Force Nature, it's just one more sign for UNC to put the pedal down.
And also gaining some more life. I mean, they're putting their health back above 30, keeping it clear board, and he saw the Force of Nature used the last turn. So this Frothing Berserker, they might not have really a way to deal with this with only 3 cards in their hand.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite lethal this turn, but when you set your opponent to 4 and you've got a major amount of card advantage, that's usually going to do it. And UT throws out that well played. Game number 1's going to UNC, and pretty well navigated patron game here. Really all the difficult decisions I think were on UTA's side.